I needed a place to put all my 3D printers and electronic stuff. So first, I made a room, and today we're gonna make it awesome. In case you missed the last video, I actually split my shop into sections and built a room here in my basement. And the whole intention was to keep all the dust out there and give me a clean room where I could move all the 3D printers, my electronic station, and a bunch of computer equipment. And in that video, I intentionally didn't finish the window, and I didn't really do anything to the room except add lights and electrical around the walls. And that's because I didn't want to rush the design. I want this room to be incredibly useful and look awesome. Specifically, I want it to look like it's from Tron. Now, if you don't know what Tron is, that's no big deal. It was a movie from the 80s that took place inside of a computer for the most part, but it really pushed visual effects forward a lot, and it made a huge impact on me as a very young kid. And then about 30 years after the original movie, they made a sequel, which took that whole visual awesomeness and pushed it to an entirely new level. The imagery in this movie, it gives me a very specific feeling, and I love it. And I want that room to give me the exact same feeling. Unfortunately, I can't start designing that stuff in this space yet because it's not gonna stay this empty. I've gotta move in. And just like if you're loading a moving truck, you gotta put the biggest stuff in first. The big stuff is in place, and yes, other things will eventually be in here, but the big stuff is what matters because I have to build my design around these big objects. Since we're talking about design, it's time to go actually look at our source material. Now, I'm not trying to pull from any specific space in Tron, really just trying to get the aesthetic. And when you go through these art books for the movies, it's great because it's a combination of pre-production art and stills from the movies, so you get to see how it evolved, but it also gives you a lot more to pull from. In these books, you've got all sorts of stuff about the costumes, about the sets, about the vehicles, and all of that aesthetic goes together to give you a feeling. And the feeling is what I'm trying to replicate. And one of the things that gives me that feeling in Tron are the luminescent edges of everything. Everything from the light bikes to the weapons to the costumes, they have these lines that emit light. And that wouldn't really happen normally in the real world, but it's something that makes this look really unique, and that's what I want to capture. Painting the room black was intentional. Not every space in Tron is black, but the black rooms really make all of those different colors pop out. So we started with black as our canvas, and I've got 3 ideas to help this room kind of come alive. The first one is the window. Eventually, I'm gonna uncover this window and build in some sort of a light system that you can see from inside and from outside so that it kind of carries the coolness of this room out into the shop. But this is gonna be really similar to what I do in that wall. And I say that wall, but I actually mean all 3 of these walls. It is a long, continuous shape at the top of the room that I can run lights across. I can have some sort of a shape that chases. We're gonna get to that, but the first thing we gotta deal with is the ceiling. My goal for the ceiling is to feel like it's alive, like there's information moving around above you. So we're gonna have lights that come down the room and then split off to go in different directions. And I think I've already figured out how to do it. In this room, we're gonna be using a lot of LED strips, but we're gonna have some different kinds. Now the first one is this really simple LED strip that you've seen before. The problem with these is that if you're looking right at them, you can see every individual LED because there's a lot of space in between them. So in some of the places where you're actually gonna see the strip, I'm gonna use more of a neon LED, and really this is the same strip with a diffuser on the outside of it, but it makes the light a lot more uniform and looks a little bit more like Tron. But the strip I'm gonna use for the ceiling is something I've never used before. It's like a hybrid of those other 2 types. It's kind of weird. This strip is called RGB IC, and that's because there's an IC chip on every one of these little segments that controls all of the LEDs from here to here. And that means that you're not lighting an individual one, you're lighting a section at a time. And lighting a whole section at a time might not be the right look, but I won't know until I do some programming and try it out. Now this is just some sample code that I got just so I could see the different colors and how the light moves across them and how quickly they refresh. I think this is gonna work fine, but now I gotta get these strips on the ceiling. And the plan is to have 5 strips of light coming out of that end of the room, traveling down the room and splitting off in different directions. It means I had to buy a whole lot of LEDs, and I don't want those strips to be stuck directly to the ceiling tiles, so I've gotta figure out a way to mount them that is independent of the tiles themselves. I think I've found something that will work out really well. This is white corrugated plastic. This is the stuff they use for political signs. It's super cheap, you can get it in really big sheets, you can cut it with a utility knife, and it's super lightweight. Plus, it takes paint pretty well, so I'm thinking some black paint, some magnets, and we might have a great surface that's removable just in case. I've been working on the programming for a little while to figure out how to make it look like a piece of light is being sent along a string. And I've been trying it on a coil of LEDs, and I can see that light moving around the coil, which means it should work fine on a straight line. So now I've just got to make that code do it 5 times at random with a bunch of variables so that I can control the color and the timing, and then we'll try it out on the ceiling. There we go. Oh, that's so cool. It totally worked. So that turned out awesome. It's exactly what I wanted. A little bit of motion just kind of on the ceiling. It's subtle, but also really cool to look at if you happen to catch one. So the entire thing was written so that it's random. It randomly sends a different color of light down each one of these strips. And like I mentioned before, they're basically just numbered lists. So it lights up number 1, and then on the next loop, it just moves it to number 2. And on the next loop, it moves it to number 3. And it does that at a random pace. So you never know when it's gonna shoot what color down which strip. And all of that stuff is controlled by very, very simple programming, things that we definitely cover in our Arduino for Makers course. I would love for you to check it out if you're interested at all, because it can make projects very, very cool. So now we've got our motion on the ceiling, little bits of information flying around, and now we need some ambiance in the room, just some glow to make it feel like you are in the world of Tron. And that we can do very, very simply. And for this, we're gonna use the LED strip that has the diffuser on it to make it look like neon. This will give a more even spread of the light, because I want this to be just kind of a morphing color spectrum, just kind of moving light, rather than these really detailed, fast moving individual lights that are on the ceiling. Now, to be clear, I think it's really important to understand how writing code works. That way you can edit it if you need to. You can create it from scratch and make it do specifically what you want. But sometimes people make tools just to make things easier, and I ran across one that's very, very cool. This is a website that generates the code for an Arduino to give you different lighting strip effects, and they're very simple effects. They're fades or runs or rainbow changes, but you do have a lot of control over the specifics around individual light strips. You basically tell it the type of strip that you're using and how many LEDs there are, and then just fill out a little information around color and animation style, and it gives you some really simple code that works super well. So I took one of those strips and I mounted it on the back side of this desk all the way around, and then I loaded some of that code onto the Arduino, and check this out. Basically what I did was tell that animation builder to just take a few colors and move them from end to end, and it just does that in a loop. But the colors are all variations of blues and greens and whites, so at a distance it looks like they just kind of like move in and out, almost like it's swelling and compressing. And it's a really cool effect in person. It works really well behind the 3D printers because that's a concrete wall. So as the light goes up, it catches all the little imperfections and the details and actually shows off the texture. I want to do the same thing on this wall, which means I need to make a little bit of a tray to run the entire length of the wall to hide the lights. such a simple addition, but it makes a huge difference in the space. It already looks way cooler, and it was super easy to do. But now that that's done, we can move on to the window. Now originally I was gonna cut out that panel to roughly the same shape, leave a little bit of a border, and then edge light the actual panel to get some light across it. But I think instead I'm gonna simplify it and turn it into 2 layers. That looks really good with the film off. It's almost too clear. We're probably gonna wanna obscure it a little bit with some of the overlays that we're gonna add. But using acrylic does cause a little bit of a problem. It tends to just build up static really easily. In fact, with my arm right here, I can feel static on the hairs on my arm. And that causes dust to stick to it. And on this side, it's gonna be normal dust. On that side, it's gonna be sawdust. And that's gonna be a mess. But regardless, we're ready to move on to the next step, which is gonna be adding the LEDs to the inside, wrapped around the window, right out of frame. I legitimately don't know if this is gonna work out like I'm expecting, but I used the cutout from the wall and traced it onto this piece of material to make an approximate match of the cutout for a piece that's gonna go on the inside. But to keep this in place and to give us a place to put the LEDs, we've got to put some stuff on the back of it. So my plan is to build an offset on the back of this piece. I've got about 1.5 inches here on the top and the bottom, so I'm gonna make the offset that all the way around just with some pieces of plywood that are the same thickness as the LED strip. That'll give us a place to put the LEDs, but also act as a standoff on the back side of the window, theoretically. Kind of struggling here. I had an idea for this window about there being multiple layers of plexiglass, and the layers behind would have patterns and textures and edges and stuff that would be lit up by the LEDs, and I just can't see it. And that's really frustrating to me because I don't have a clear vision of what it looks like. So I don't know how to get there. I don't know what I need to do to get it to that point. And now that I'm looking at it in place, I'm not even sure how I would do that even if I could see it. So we're gonna pivot a little bit, but keep the same idea. And that original idea was to use this window as some sort of an indicator. If I have a connected Arduino here, it can be reading things from printers or from websites and actually light up different LEDs to give me indications in the window. I don't know exactly how that's gonna work or what I'm gonna do with it, but it's a super cool idea. So I want to go ahead and build it in. Unfortunately, you can very clearly see the LEDs in here, and that's not really the look I was going for. Putting the neon stuff that I used everywhere else in here would have been a great solution, but I don't have any more of those, and these are already glued in. So we're gonna figure out a way to diffuse these, which means we have to take this panel back down. But before I get too far ahead of myself and change anything, I need to verify that this idea is gonna work. And what is the idea? Well, I wanna cut a thin strip of that same acrylic and actually lay it over top of the LEDs, and if I frost that acrylic, it should help diffuse those LEDs. Now the problem is I'm not sure if that will bend around that crazy shape of the window. But a quick little test showed me that it actually does work really well. Just some hot glue on the back of this hardboard holds that in the angle, and I can bend it around those curves, which means we're good to go. We just gotta cut some long strips. Well, that looks pretty terrible. That type of LED, at least for what I'm going for, just does not work if you can have a line of sight directly to the strip. You can see each one and it just doesn't look good. Luckily, I have one more strip of the stuff I used on the ceiling, so I'm gonna pull that panel, pull the LEDs, replace it with this strip, and see if that's better. And if not, I'm not sure what we're gonna do. These LEDs work way better. It's a lot more uniform all the way around. It's gonna look a lot better in the window. But while I was getting this working, I ran into kind of a weird problem with this microcontroller. This is an ESP module, an 8266. Actually, that thing is right there. But this is a microcontroller that I call an Arduino, like a lot of people call tissue Kleenex. It's a microcontroller, it uses the same code. But I use these things all the time because they've got Wi-Fi built onto them. They're small and they're very inexpensive, usually about $3 if you buy a few of them at a time. Originally, I connected these LEDs to one of these ESP modules because I can have it go out to the internet and check for values. I can check the status of things, and then I can use the lights as an indicator, as a display. Well, for some reason, this thing was causing the LEDs to flicker in a really weird way that I've never had before. So I'm switching from that ESP 8266 to the old school Arduino Uno, but the newest version of it, which is the R4. Now there's two of these. One is called the Minima, and it intentionally does not have a lot of stuff on it. It's really basic. But the other one is the Wi-Fi, and it actually has an ESP32 module on it. So I get basically more functionality out of the ESP than the other one I was using. Now the downside is that ESP module is really cheap. This one, not so much. I don't actually know what I want to use this kind of display to display, so as a first test, we're just going to use it to tell me if the internet is connected or not. This is really simple because there's already example code that goes out, connects to your local Wi-Fi, and then can turn on an LED on the board if there's a connection. And if there's not, it'll turn that LED off. And we can easily modify that code. Instead of toggling an LED that's on this board on and off, we can actually change the color of the LEDs in the window. So normally I'll have this window glow blue and white, but if the internet goes down, like it does every single week, it will notify me because the window can turn red. And that way I can complain to the company. And this is really just a test to see if I can have something that is connected to the internet, that's checking the status of something outside of this room, and then displaying the results. Now, if you have ideas for how I could use that idea in this space to have an indicator of something, whether it's printers or I don't know, something, let me know down in the comments because I have not thought of a really good idea yet. And hey, there we go. So that worked out pretty well. Now to verify, I'm gonna go in the other room and turn off my router and you can see if this changes. Hey, it worked. Okay, so we have an indicator. It's displaying something. I need your ideas as to what else it could display. We have one more thing we need to do this room. Now my last idea to add a little bit of life and interest to the room is actually a lot more lo-fi. It's just a light bulb, but it's a blacklight light bulb. And that UV light will make anything with fluorescence in the room kind of glow. So with just a little bit of work, I think we can take advantage of this simple light bulb and actually kind of make things in the room move. Check this out. As I move this light around, you'll see that everything orange over there, all of the filament, actually lights up and glows, which is super cool. And if I put my hand in front of that, you can see that that fluorescence kind of changes a little bit. Looks like it's moving, and that's what I want to try to recreate. So my plan is to take this bulb and just shine it into the room, but then put something over top of it with a bunch of little holes in it. And as I move those holes around, light will kind of hit different spots of the room, theoretically making all those glowing things glow and then not glow. I think I can make it look like they're kind of alive. And I think I can come up with this whole thing in Fusion and then just 3D print a little mechanism to handle that. After just a little bit, I've got a mount for a stepper motor that connects to a gear. That gear turns another big gear, which will actually have a shroud on top of it to cover up the light bulb, and it has little holes to allow the light to come out in different places. I absolutely love having an idea and then modeling it in Fusion because immediately you can start to see it come together. It doesn't cost you anything in materials or loss to do something wrong digitally. And once you've got it all figured out, then you can send it out to a printer or take it to the wood shop or a laser or however you want to use it. This is an incredibly powerful tool, but a lot of people are kind of afraid of it. And I know that because people tell me that in the comments. They tell me that they're afraid of 3D modeling because they don't know where to start. That is exactly why I made an online course called Fusion for Makers. In that course, you don't have to know anything. We start you at the very beginning. We show you how to install the software and get a free personal license so you can use it for free. And then we show you all the tools and start building projects so that eventually you can take your own ideas and build models of them that you can do whatever you want to with. I would love it if you would hit the link down in the description, go over and check out the first few videos for free, see if the course is for you. And if not, no big deal. If it is, there's a discount code down there as well so you can get a better deal on the course. Go over and check it out. I'd love to know what you think. Okay, so now that we've got these models ready to go, we can go do some test prints. You never get it right the first try. I definitely had to adjust and reprint a couple of things, but I think I have all the pieces, and it's very, very simple. And of course, it could be simpler or done a different way, but I'm using what I have on hand and I'm kind of making it up as I go. I've got a lamp base here to hold this, and I just have to wire on a simple cord to be able to plug this in. I'm not going to control this with a relay or anything, although you certainly could. And then for the other side of it, I've got a stepper motor, which is connected to an Arduino with some code that will just kind of randomly turn it, random amounts at a random time. And I'll show you how that's gonna work. Basically, this controller is just getting a random amount of turn and a random pace. So sometimes it doesn't move at all, and then sometimes it spins. And of course, I can adjust all that stuff in the code that's on the Arduino. As far as the printed parts, I've got my socket for the light bulb, and that's gonna sit inside of a mount that'll go to a piece of wood or something, and then there's a gear that fits down inside that, and it can spin. Then I've got a little ring that's gonna be glued right there, which will be where I mount this thing to go around the light bulb. So as I spin this gear, the entire shroud will spin, and that will hide or show the light. Then I've got this little collar piece that's made to go around the stepper motor so that it can be mounted down to something, and then a gear that fits right on top of it.
Perfect.
I think it's gonna work out pretty well, but we need to spread that light around the room a little bit. So on the inside of this thing, I'm gonna line it with aluminum foil so that each surface will reflect light out the other holes, theoretically. We also need to add more fluorescent things around the room. These are invisible UV ink markers, and this is great because we can mark around the room little highlights and edges and details of things that you won't really notice until the UV light hits them. I did write a few things on this piece of wood, and you might be able to see it on camera, but in person, you wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it. I absolutely love all the lights and animation in this room. It feels super cool to do work in here, but even with that stuff turned off, it feels awesome. It feels like a purposeful, intentional room that's dedicated to a certain type of work, and that's really inspiring. But we do have one kind of big problem. I can't call this the clean room. It needs a better name than that. Something quick, snappy, something that defines what the space is for, and I need your help with that. So let me know what you think I should call this room down in the comments, along with any other ideas you have for how to make it look cool or other things that I could add to it. While you're down there, don't forget there's a discount code for the Arduino course in case you want to check it out. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Now it's time for bloopers. But we're also gonna make like it looks, make like it. We're gonna have a bunch of lights that start here, shoot out random little whoops, then frost them with a sander, froth them with a sander. But I think I've got everything. So I did have to adjust and reprint a few small